Okay, so this is a video I've decided to do simply for the reason I couldn't find one on YouTube to help me. And what I'm going to show here is how you actually, on the KTM Superduke GT Pannier set up the locking barrel to match your key. It took me a couple of attempts to actually understand the instructions. I've got it now, and hopefully this video will help those that come to do this in the future. So what have I got here? So what I would recommend first and foremost is emptying the sachets of all the bits and pieces, and there are quite a few. I'd also recommend doing it on a table clearly lit, because these pieces, as you can see, are minute. In fact, I can't even pick it up. Are minute, tiny little springs, easily lost. And whilst there are quite a few spares of the springs, you don't want to be chasing your tail looking for them. So what have I got here? So you'll find in the packs each of these little locking shims, and they are each numbered, very, very small etchings on them. So here are number 1s, number 2s, number 3s. You'll see in a minute why it's important to break these out now. The little springs that keep the pressure for these once the locking barrel is connected. You have the locking barrel itself, an O-ring, and you have a locking shim. And you know it's a locking shim for two reasons. It's in its own separate bag, and it doesn't have a number. It's also important to note that in with the locking shim you get two little springs also. Do not mix these with these springs, because they're a different size and a different spring tension apparently. The other thing I'd recommend is get a sheet of paper, as I've done here, and use it as a record of which shims go in which part of the locking barrel. As I found yesterday, it's very difficult to remember, so I wrote it down, and this is really, really helpful. Let me just talk you through the barrel itself. So you have, as you can see, standard arrangements here. At the very end, this has got a lug on it. That's important to remember that for later on. But you'll see each of these slots here are for where you put each of the barrel locking shims. What I've done on the diagram here is I've actually drawn out either side of the barrel, the different slots, and as you can see here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes for springs, and there are 5 slots for each of these shims. The longest slots are where the shims go, and the shallower, shorter slots is where the base of the shims that go in from the other side locate. So you have 4 shims in this side, 5 shims on this side. And you can see here, as I've drawn it, they are labelled A, C, E, G and I. And on this side, B, D, F and H. Now, on the 5 slotted side of the barrel, the one on the most left is slot I. That's where the locking shim goes last of all. And slot G and H, which is on this side, are not used. So it's worthwhile just noting that as well. So what's the process? So the process is quite straightforward. Using the number one shims, you locate them into A, C and E. But before you do that, each of these little springs get located, as you can see, quite difficult, inside the slot. I don't know if you saw that, but inside the edge of the slot there's a little circular recess, and that's where these 3 little springs get placed. So they don't drop through, so they just sit in there nicely, but again just a little bit fiddly, as you can see. Another reason why you do this on the table, so you don't want to lose these. And what you do now is you use 3 of the shims that are numbered 1, and you locate them with the longer lug here on top of the spring, so they fit in nice and neatly. Sorry, I'm a bit ham-fisted. Nice and neatly into there. Like so. And the next thing you do is you get your key and you put it into the barrel. Now hopefully you can see there is that as the key moves in and out, those shims move up and down to reflect the recess in the key, which is unique to you and your bike. So by putting the key in all the way, you'll see these 3 shims are elevated by different degrees. So the one in slot A is flush with the barrel. So what we know now is that that first shim is correct, i.e. number 1 in slot A. You can look at the next slots C and E, and because these are elevated, you know that shim number 1 is not correct for that slot. What you do know also is you should be able to pick up there the shim in slot C is lifted by 2 grooves. I hope the video camera's picking this up, but there's 2 little grooves in there, and this one here has 1 groove. So the principle is, and this is the overarching principle as to how this install works, is that using shim number 1 as the baseline, in the second slot, because it shows 2, you add 2 to 1. So in slot C is going to be shim number 3, because using 1 as the baseline, you add the 2, so that gives you 3, and on the slot E, it's raised by 1 groove. So adding 1 to 1 gives you 2. So the sequence of shims for this A, C and E slot is number 1 in slot A, number 3 in slot C, and shim 2 in slot E. So let me just show you that. So again, you've got to be careful, you don't drop these out. So that's number 1, that goes back in the 1 pile. That's also number 1, so that goes back in the 1 pile. But I'm going to put shim number 3 in slot C, and I'm going to put a shim number 2 in slot E. And what you should see now is when I reinsert the key, all of those shims are now flush. And all that needs to be done now is rotate here and do the same for these 2 slots here. So I'm going to do this quickly. I'll just fast forward this, but what I'm also going to do, I'm actually going to take out these 3 shims, but before I do so, on my sheet here, I'm going to remind myself that it's shim 1 there, shim 3 there, and shim 2 there. And that's because I'm going to take these out, put them back in their piles, because I've got to, and also take the 3 springs out, because I need to turn upside down to do the same here now. And I'm just going to check in the instructions. So what we're doing now is the same for slot B, D and F. So again, the same principle, but making sure that we're following this here now at the bottom, is I'm going to put, if I can pick them, the spring into there. Whoops, I told you this was a bit fiddly. So spring in there, in slot B. Spring in there, into slot D. And the last thing we need to do in terms of the shim is get this locking shim here with its own spring and put that into I. So in there is I. Once you've done that and you've put all the shims in, again it's quite intricate, you've got to make sure you don't drop them out, is literally put the O-ring on with all the shims and present it in to the pannier. And I'll show you that in a minute, so I'll come back to you in a second once I have all the different shims in. My other little tip is to now introduce the key, but only part way, just to prove also beforehand all the shims are now flush, so you know that's there. And what I would do now is just pull it out part way, just to hold them in, so that I can now turn it upside down and put the locking one in, which is the final one with its own spring, like that. And again, you know this is the locking one because it doesn't have a number on it. And that locking one goes into I. And don't forget that G and H don't have shims. And that's it. That's the barrel now done. So all I'm going to do now is literally just bring that across there. Okay, so with the key in the barrel, remember earlier on I said there's like a lug on the top of here. I don't know if you can pick that up, but there's a little lug on there. That lug goes towards the locked position, so here it's 6 o'clock, and I literally push that in. It needs a little bit of force. Okay, so what I've done now, I've literally, with the key in, pushed it in to the pannier, and what should happen now is literally turn the key and up she pops. Okay, well hopefully that video has been a little bit of help. I'm going to finish these off by putting the coloured plastic cover on here. I'm going to put one on the bikes. Okay, so here are the two panniers on the bike. So literally to open them, it's key in until that pops up, and you literally lift it away, and to put them back on you slide it and just do exactly the opposite. Push the handle down and lock. One final thought, one thing I've noticed, and I'm not really happy with them, but these stick-on plastic KTM logos are rubbish. They're audio lifting, it's only flimsy, the adhesive that's on, so not happy at all. So they're going to have to come off and get redone. I will be speaking to the dealer about that, because that's poor quality. That they're just lifting off already and they're going to come off, and I've seen quite a few posts where these have come off and had to be replaced or just removed and taken off altogether. So for a set of panniers which are £600 plus, that shouldn't be happening. But anyway, on a positive, they fit brilliantly, got loads of space, and roll on the tours later this year. Cheers guys, thanks for watching.